Hi everyone, this is Felicia of Super Nerdy Church Girl, and I wanted to talk to you about reality star Cyn Santana and the Afro Latina identity. So, if you're unfamiliar with Cyn Santana, she stars in a reality show, Love and Hip Hop, New York, I think. I'm familiar with her because she's the fiance of Joe Budden, and I follow the Joe Budden podcast. And Joe Budden, if you don't follow the podcast, is an ex-rapper who is also a cast member of Love and Hip Hop. So, now you know that. So, Cyn Santana was trending on Twitter the other day because someone dug up an old interview of hers with Angela Yee, and Angela Yee is a radio host of The Breakfast Club, which is a popular morning show out of New York. And in that radio interview, she made some comments regarding black men, their preference for Latina women over black girls. And as you can imagine, that became like a tempest in the Twitterverse teapot. So I'm going to read you her comment so that you can kind of get a feel of, what she was saying. Although I have to, in all fairness, say this is just, it was like a minute or so out of like a couple hour long conversation. So in that conversation, they start off talking about like how J-Lo was dating, like J-Lo was dating Puff, and then she started dating Puerto Rican singer Mark Anthony. And so Cyn is just like, I just love black guys and Spanish girls together. Y'all can keep the Puerto Rican men. I'm good. I do black guys all day. I did the Spanish thing. It doesn't work out for me. I'm good. So, she goes and say like Spanish men, and that's the term she's using. They're too emotional. And then she says, black guys cater to us Spanish girls especially. Like you know what? Let me not even get into that. So Angela was just like, oh, the black girl's gonna be mad at you. She's like, I didn't mean it. So Santana says, I didn't mean it like that, but the black girl's gonna take it personal. But no, I'm done with the poppies. So once this video the snippet is an audio, was released, a lot of people on Twitter just kind of came at her neck. And so she did swiftly apologize. She took ownership for everything she said. She said she was young. She says, I said some bird stuff. I'm going to say stuff. She didn't say stuff. And she regrets it. She's a better person. She's learned. And, people were just like, oh, you're black. How can you even make a differentiation? And she basically was like, she didn't understand the term Afro Latina or something to that effect. So that brings us to today's discussion. It's because it's really bigger than Cyn Santana and her, slip of the tongue or whatever during that interview. I specifically recall I was working at a bank in Texas, and the branch manager was this very blonde-haired, blue-eyed white guy. I believe he was of like German descent or something like that. And his girlfriend was a very, very brown-skinned, maybe like 3-4 shades darker than I am, a wide nose like myself, hair that was relaxed, obviously. And I must have said something to him like, oh, you're dating a black girl. And I never said anything to her except when I met her, just like pleasantries, like, hi, nice to meet you, et cetera, et cetera. But he comes back and he's like, my girl, I don't even remember her name. He's like, she doesn't like it when people refer to her as black girl. She gets offended. She's Dominican. And so I was just like, what? Like, okay. Obviously, lady, like, based on your phenotype, your ancestors were part of the African diaspora. And if you're unfamiliar with that, then you should read a book. You know, African Americans got to America on a boat, and so this wasn't the only stop. I believe the first stop was in the Caribbean. And ever since, let me see, I took some notes, like the 1500s, Africans were on the island of Puerto Rico, and then, you know, throughout that region. So I wanted to bring up also, let me just get into this argument. So she keeps referring to herself as Spanish. And it's kind of cringy because I love the Joe Budden podcast, but I've heard him say this. Oh, the Spanish girls out in Dykeman, whatever. I guess that's someplace in New York or whatever. How fly they are and how the men were always thirsting after those girls or whatever. And, you know, I believe there's truth to that. There's always this fetish for light skin, long hair. And then the exotic or racially ambiguous women. So I do get that, but Spanish is a language. All it means is that the area of the globe where your ancestors are from was conquered by Spanish conquistadors, and that's why the official language is Spanish. The official language in America, because of the British, is English, but African Americans aren't. You wouldn't say they were English, but yeah, so that's the Spanish argument. Hispanic or Latino basically means that you are the descendants of Spain. And that's just not true when you look at the racial breakdown of like the Dominican Republic. Let's stick with that island specifically. Now, of course, there are, you know, what would be considered like white Dominicans or Dominicans from the Spanish heritage, but a lot of the native or Taino, the Indians that were on the island were quickly wiped out through disease and war, but mainly through disease from these outsiders. So they were replaced with African slaves, and so that's why you have the huge African population and that mixture in those islands. But there is this colorism issue in Latin America, and especially in the Dominican Republic, and you can see that even with the island of Haiti, which is the same island as the Dominican Republic, is just split, and the darker Africans were even exported to Haiti, and there's just like this real division there. So I bring this up to say, like, you have to think about a couple things when we look at this situation with Cyn Santana. You have to look at it through the lens of history, and there is a great miseducation of the Negro. So that I read that book. Was that Carter G. Woodson? I'm gonna Google it really quick because it is a great Carter G. Woodson. That Afro Studies minor comes in handy, man. But so you have to look at it through the lens of history. You have to look at it through the lens of colorism. And I want to be clear, this doesn't mean that if you are a Dominican descent that you are African American, because culturally, you know, we're different. It just means that your people are descendants of Africa and you're part of the African diaspora. And acknowledging that doesn't make you less, you know, Dominican or whatever. But I'm also not a fan of making people claim their blackness, you know. So if you don't want to be black, you don't have to be black. I know, like, is it Zoe Saldana? I believe she's Dominican as well. And she's a very, very brown skinned Dominican, wide nose, phenotypically very African-esque. But she is famously, doesn't seem to claim that heritage. She's more of I'm Latina, I speak Spanish. And that's great, but she, came to, I would say, notoriety playing a lot of black female characters and roles. And so, whatever. That's kind of not my issue. But, yeah. And ironically, Joe Budden used to date this other Afro Latina, Tahiri Jose, and she is Dominican, and she is very proudly Afro Latina. She even has that in her Instagram, Twitter description, and she hashtags Afro Latina like a lot, or Afro Latina on the move. And it's kind of funny that that's his ex-girlfriend, and he proposed to her on Love and Hip Hop, and she declined him, and so now he has this newer quote unquote Spanish girl, that's what she called herself, and yeah, and she refers to herself as Spanish. I just thought that was weird. But I mean, what's your take on it? I will add this one thing. I also follow Laz Alonso, who is an Afro-Cuban actor. Well, he's American and he's an actor, but his parents, I believe, are from Cuba. And he brought up this conversation a long time ago on Twitter, and I remember interacting with him on it, and I even parlayed that story that I just told you about the bank manager's girlfriend. And he was basically, he champions like the blackness of Cubans, Dominicans, and basically say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. And yeah, and so there are I would like to know like what your thoughts are on that topic. Are you Afro Latina? Do you what do you think of that term? Do you even think that it matters? Also, what did you think about what Cyn Santana said? Do you accept her apology? Yeah, so let's discuss.